And boom, and we're live. Welcome to a fine, fresh morning here in Scotland. And today we're going to be chatting to, and I want to reach out to a member who basically met on the forum, and he reached out to me, and we're going to have this chat. And there's going to be a lot we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Dawn. We're going to talk about Clouds. But I think the best place I really wanted to go is someone like yourself would ask you a question which we were just talking about before going live about how will the safe network handle real-time interaction? Now, before we go any further, I don't want to let people. I just want to let people maybe listen to this. That the connection between me and you're in Vietnam, so the connection to people maybe listening may be a bit dodgy. But just to let people know about that. But anyway,
Oh,
so how you doing this afternoon, anyway, my friend? And like I said, really, the question I really want to kick off with was how was the safe network going to handle kind of real-time interaction, really? But I'll leave that to you, my brother.
well, so I'm actually not that sure. It's actually that in terms of the safe network, this is one of my concerns. In that, okay, may I dig right into it? So, the safe network is a distributed system. And so far, if you were going to say there's a prototype safe network out there, any sort of equivalent, it would be Freenet. Freenet is a open source distributed network that prevents censorship by ensuring that all of the nodes in the network are able to both serve and act as a client. So each node that joins stores data for the network and propagates that information throughout the network. Now, Freenet is notoriously slow, but I was asked why that was the other day. And I on the forum, I just said Java, and I hope that's right. I don't know if you program at all, and I don't program at all, actually. I just use a lot of programs. But Java is really slow, especially compared with something like Rust. The Safe Network is written in the Rust language, which is one of a new breed of systems programming languages. There's two. There's Go and Rust. And both of them are kind of enabling these web miracles. I use a lot of things written in Go on a daily basis, and when I compare them to applications written in C or Java, well, okay, it's much faster than the app written in Java, and compared to C, the really interesting part I think about this is that one of the apps written in a newer language, they're better. What I mean by they're better, the developer is able to include more of the features that they'd like to because the programming language is designed around the needs of the developer and not around the needs of the computer. C absolutely was designed around the needs of the machine because it was an earlier language, and so people needed to do that. Now, real-time interaction on the web, though, just to sort of dig into that for a second. In distributed networks, like the Safe Network, it's a little bit tougher because, okay, so basically what you've got, Safe Network has a situation where they've got to both facilitate stored data interactions, so stuff that comes from a database or a file, sending that to the user, and real-time interactions. But I kind of wanted to zoom out a little bit and talk about real-time interaction on today's web. Because the more that advances, the more I think we're going to see society change. Real-time interaction is conversational. It's not like the other kinds of web interactions because there's no gap. You can have a conversation, you can be fluid. And all of the technologies that enable real-time interaction. They're generally a lot more complex. So just for example, there's an application called Etherpad. And what it allows you to do is edit a document with many people in real time. Sort of like Google Docs, except Etherpad is open source. And so you can rip it open and have a look inside. Because of that, you can kind of get a taste of the complexity of a real-time application. They usually use something called an operational transform, which I don't know the exact details of, but I know they get a bit hairy. I used the other day a thing called Tidal Wave, which is a wiki, but a real-time wiki. And it adds so much to it, because if you're in a situation, assume a swarm, right? A swarm of users. And all of a sudden, you can do things you couldn't. I know a guy who helps people write books in a week. He helps software teams document their work in a week using a collaborative editing solution. You know, what they end up with usually is a 100 or 200 page book on how to use their software really well. You couldn't write a book in a week in the past, not of that length anyway. So this is just one of the advances enabled by mass real-time communications.
Like you said, you mentioned that you had zoomed out and you looked at the internet as it is. So what's going to be what's your concerns around the safe network and real-time interaction then?
Oh, well, all right. First of all, I don't know enough. What I mean by that is, since we haven't seen the test network in action, I don't know how the safe network is actually going to function. It may function really well, but real-time has been a challenge in other distributed network or privacy-centric networks like Tor. Real-time interaction has traditionally been a challenge, and so I expect it's probably going to be a challenge for the safe network team. That said, the safe network's basic premise is something that I find really exciting. I think the core of what they're doing is monetizing bandwidth. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the economic changes that we're experiencing these days, there is no difference between computation and money and bandwidth and money. They're essentially one and the same, because utilizing them is how you make money. Read recently that one of the things that's been really pronounced on the various stock indices in the States is that there's a shift away from tangible assets and toward intangibles. And now it's like far more than half of our major stocks track intangibles. That, like, so for example, you know, software might be an intangible, or a brand name might be another one, or intellectual property, but that's an evil intangible. I hate it. It doesn't help anyone.
No.
Even the people who own it. That's kind of the worst part. You know, they do this to protect themselves against other people using their work, but these days, the best thing that could happen for you is someone else using your work. You know, we see this in software. Linux is so robust because thousands of people use it, can review the code, and change it. You know, and really any open system like that where you experience large user growth, you won't win by protecting anything. And in fact, you're not protecting anything. What you're doing is you're harming your code base, because code only evolves with users. Nobody's there to report a bug. Well, okay. So I guess maybe on the topic of monetizing bandwidth, what do you think the key factor behind MadeSafe is? Because that's the one I've locked onto. Like, they are creating a system where if you help to propagate free internet, the network will compensate you for that.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. Really, I thought when I first got my head around it, when I first heard about that very concept, I immediately thought of places, all the places I've lived around the world, and thought, wow, this is going to has the potential to unshackle a whole set of humanity that's been tied down by the fact that they can't earn any rewards for doing things that we're doing right now. I mean, I know I've had experience like you, my man. I mean, you're living out there in Vietnam and stuff, but you know, internet connection has penetrated massively. I mean, I went to live in Argentina in '97, and I think the internet penetration was something like under 3%, and that was in '97. And you think now it's probably 80-90%. So if you just take the same exponential rise, the point I'm trying to make is that most people around the world now have internet connections. The levels of internet connections are varying, but the point being that people, like I say, these huge masses of humanity that have now the potential to earn just for, like you say, for farming and for using their resource, their internet space, I think has the potential to be huge. And I think where this was a real, to me, I think there's a real step beyond Bitcoin was, and the whole blockchain technology was, it's ease of use. That's going to be the one that, to me, that's, you know, you were mentioning about, you know, real time, and that's one of the things that that sits in your mind. I think one of the things that sits in my mind is going to be making every application, every piece of software that can possibly, every app that can possibly go on the Safe network, making it as easy to use. Because I think that's one of the things that's the difference between potential taking off and hopefully what we're talking about, and what you were just alluding to gently about how we can, you know, like you said, how it can have the potential to have real-time interaction and therefore open up a whole potential to humanity. But that can all be done away with if it's complicated. I don't know how Bitcoin is taking over in Vietnam. I don't know. You're over there, my friend. But
So Bitcoin, there's an exchange that allows you to exchange Bitcoin for Vietnam Dong that's registered with the government, which is good and bad, right? You know, because it's good because, hey, you can use it and you can use it pretty easily. It's bad because, well, you pay a pretty large fee. It's about 4% to turn Bitcoin into Dong, or vice versa. Cryptocurrency it's fascinating. And even watching Bitcoin struggle lately with this whole block size thing, that's fascinating too, frankly. Because this is the first time that we've ever been able to have a debate like this about a globally distributed system.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, you know, any similar debate was restricted to a nation state at best. And actually, I think that this Bitcoin debate, it shows China's really been rather cunning about all this. They have an official Bitcoin ban, but that's, you know, just on paper. And actually, China is, quite frankly, one of the easiest places to use Bitcoin. And their Bitcoin ban just keeps Chinese banks from holding Bitcoins. Other entities in the country are free to do whatever with Bitcoin. So what I mean when I say their strategy is quite cunning, they've nationalized it just through sheer mass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, China more or less controls the Bitcoin blockchain, and this can be seen in the deadlock in the debate. And I imagine that we're going to see more of this, both with MadeSafe and other technologies too, because one way or another, MadeSafe is going to get in, although it's increasingly much harder to cross China's firewall, and that's actually another part of the problem fueling the whole Bitcoin situation right now is that the miners don't have enough bandwidth. They can't get enough bandwidth. And sometimes when they can, people have noticed the firewall doing funny things to mined blocks. An article on it, I'm not too sure where that, it was very interesting. Basically, point is, it's working in favor of these large Chinese Bitcoin mines. It's going to be very interesting to see where that goes. Well, let's see.
So, on that very, I mean, while you're here, that's a very good point to sort of linger on. I mean, you mentioned about firewalls, and this is one of the things that I try to explain to a lot of people all the time, that, you know, when you're in America and people say, oh, yeah, you're being watched by the NSA. That's great. That's one thing. But there's another thing, as you maybe want to allude or not allude, but you try connecting to, say, someone like Google when you're in Vietnam, or you're in the middle of a country that doesn't have these have the firewalls up. So this is, I think, one of the other things about, if we can, you know, if the potential of made safe, the ability for people to basically just completely, you know, get around the firewalls and like you said, and have the real time in connection. Now, I really want, I mean, while you're there, my man, explain to someone maybe who's never been to somewhere like Vietnam, who's never really left their hometown, and tell them what the difficulties of trying, the day-to-day difficulties of trying to connect with the outside world, because I think more people need to hear this, because I think most people, they live in a thing, and their biggest complaint is like, oh, my internet connection is quite slow. But that's a whole different reality to where, so give people an insight of what it's like living in Vietnam, trying to connect with the outside world, my friend.
I might be able to, yeah, I can show you my screen, which is actually streaming my VPN connection. Let me see here. So it's this one. Okay. And right here, you see that?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, that is actually how we're connected. This is transmitting our call. And and this is just a little workaround for Hangouts on Air. It's the only thing I've seen blocked in Vietnam. Now, China, it's a completely different story. I can't even use Google in China. Now, let me try to explain how this impacts society, because it's pretty gigantic. I actually thank you very much for that question. It's a really good one. What it does, what the Chinese government policies do, or their larger effect, is basically that they can shape society. Okay, it allows the government to choose what media you can consume, how you consume it, what information you can and cannot have, and opens up this whole new class of, I guess, thought crime, right? I don't want to be too dramatic, because there's some really great things about China, incredible things, but I left because of the internet. I left because I couldn't use Google. I was trying to sell Chinese hardware products, and I couldn't use Google to sell them. I couldn't use Facebook to sell them. I couldn't do any of these things. So then it gets into the realm of economic freedom. You know, they're limiting their people's economic freedom. They're violating tons of free trade agreements and what have you. And interestingly, it's all on paranoia. Because they have the internet set up that they do, where basically, imagine a ring around China, and at different points in the ring, you have their external connections. Those external connections are filtered by basically a weak artificial intelligence, what's called a machine learning system. It can do a lot more than just filter for keywords. It, of course, does filter for keywords, but it also looks for pages connected to undesirable pages, pages containing numbers. The Chinese frequently use numbers to allude to things. So 6-4 is the way they refer to the Tiananmen Square incident. On that day, a few years back, you couldn't download a file that had 64 in it. Because, you know, when you tried to do that, it recognized it as something alluding to Tiananmen Square and tossed it out.
So on that one, I mean, just again to linger on that point there. I mean,
Sure.
you obviously mentioned the fact that, you know, that's what I'm saying. So I'm trying to put myself. Somebody in China can go out and, like I said, they're trying to find information. They put in the keyword 64. Great, the firewall blocks it. They can't find the information. My question to you is, you're in China. That happens. Do the authorities, how will they follow that lead right back to the person who tried to put the query in, and then there's, you know, political pressure on that person? I mean, I don't know. Is that the worry, that it's not only the fact that the person's trying to go out, but they can trace them right back to who they are, and then say, oh, why are you trying to search that information? Am I correct? Or
You are correct, and that is happening to an increasing degree. When I arrived in China, I gotta say, it was a very different climate from today. Right, when I arrived in China, the firewall really only blocked like very, very anti-Chinese government stuff. Not that they should have been doing that, they shouldn't have, okay? They should deal with the criticism and improve from it, because I actually think China's got a pretty good government when you look at everything, okay? You gotta look at the fact that, you know, for a very long time, the biggest problem in China was no food.
mm-hmm.
For the past 40 years, they haven't had that problem. So, you know, that's a pretty remarkable change. But you know, when I arrived, that was just blocking anti-Chinese content, not Google. Facebook might have been blocked, but I'm not sure about that. It was 2012 when I arrived. I think they started to block it in 2011, but it was really easy to get around. Mm-hmm. Today, well, let's see, there's a site listing, I think it's greatfire.org, and at greatfire.org you can see the list of sites that are currently blocked by China. It's enormous. And again, you know, I see this as somebody who has some pretty deep positive feelings about the government there. Like, despite their failing in the internet arena, what I saw was success in just about every other arena. They've managed to sort of bootstrap a new sort of society where you can live a middle-class lifestyle on a lot less, and it's impressive. So,
I was just going to say, so in that situation, you know, you've got, so I'm trying to really get my head around this. You've got maybe a whole generation of like 20-year-olds who, they know about Facebook, they know about Europe, they know about America, they know about the same culture. Like, this is what we know. Like, okay, no, go on.
Okay, no, oh yeah, no, this is really interesting. Okay, this is cool. All right, some of them do. The urban elites do, but I actually got to tell you, man, the majority of people don't give a shit. And it's not like their fault. It's not their fault for not giving a shit. They would have no reason to give a shit. The reason they don't have a reason to give a shit is that they don't know what they're missing. That's how complete this system has been. One of the things that you should realize about China and China's web specifically, they've gotten half of their population online. So that's 600 million people. And in the world, I think we're up to 2 billion people online. And if you look at that really in terms of content contributors, right, it's probably more like 100 million. You know, people who are adding to the web as opposed to just consuming on the web.
Mm-hmm.
China has built a radically different web. And it's very high quality. Okay, the Chinese internet, basically better than the internet elsewhere, as long as you stay within that wall. As soon as you need to access information that goes outside of that wall, you're going to have problems. What do I mean by basically better than? Incredibly fast, highly participatory. So, like, you know, they do have online interactions, and lots of them, and mass scale online interactions too. It's just that if you step out of line, typically the response is they're going to delete your content. But, you know, other times, like you mentioned, yeah, people do get pressured. And like, just for example, there was a guy, he wrote VPN software, Chinese guy. And if you go on GitHub to Shadow Socks, it's called, you'll see it's pulled down. It says removed by regulation. Wait, GitHub doesn't have any regulations. Whose regulations? China's.
Okay, so the, I mean, on that, I mean, again, I really want to kind of linger on this because there's obviously a certain section in China who are aware of, like you say, because I know there's a certain section, like you said, that maybe they're very elite and rich, but they're going out and they're studying in Europe, and I know this for a fact. I know, you know what I mean. So when, what I'm trying to say, so when they return. Well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. You've lived in the. I try to equate this to maybe when communism fell, and you know you meet the Russians who would come across and they're like, I ain't ever going back to communism because I don't want to go back into that whole restriction. So I'm wondering how these kids who are coming across know about you know, our part of the world, and then they're going back into China. Are they willingly saying, oh well, okay, I understand that, that's how it is, I don't mind that, that's the freedom I've been given as a Chinese person, or that's what I'm saying, because I always think that as much as any revolution or any change in shift in paradigms always comes from bottom upwards, a lot of it always again comes from the top downwards. When you have people who, the elites, they start to see the world and then they think, again, I don't know. That's the question I'm asking, that when these kids returning, are they returning with a view of Europe of like, oh, well, a bit like, I mean, I think this is a deeper question. I mean, the Chinese have always had this, I think the reason the Chinese emperor, it's one of the things that when the British were there, for instance, back in the days of the slave trade, we used to go across with all our mechanics and, you know, all our little tricks and all the technology we invented back in the 17th century. And the Chinese emperors used to laugh us out of court and say, well, bring me something I haven't seen. And I was wondering if that's the same sort of attitude most Chinese have now. Like, well, yeah, great, impress me, you know. I don't know. I'm trying to, you've.
Oh, yeah.
I think, go on.
Even though, like, the question's really long so far, is all of the above.
Okay.
What I mean by that is this, right? So, like, okay, some of the people who return to China after being abroad, they call them sea turtles. They come back because they can, in fact, enjoy a really high standard of living in China. The government does provide incentives for them to return. And basically, you know, they turn them into knowledge workers or help them to start businesses. And there's another group who generally, they just don't come back. Increasingly, this second group of people, they tend to be the kids of maybe government officials who might be having a hard time now under the new leadership. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a very large, somewhat real, somewhat I'm just taking my rivals out back and shooting them, corruption purge going on in China right now. And again, it's existing on both levels, all right? There's definitely the element of actually trying to remove corrupt people from government. That's definitely happening. And there's also the element of, well, I just need to get rid of my political rivals. At least that's the way it seems to me. And the bigger that grows, the more and more people begin to seek refuge outside of China. I don't know if you, do you watch Bitcoin price charts at all?
On and off, but go on.
Okay. This is relevant because recently, more and more people wanted to get money out of China because they're kind of clamping down on their currency control system. And that's what drove the recent spike back up to 500. It was people trying to get money out of China. It was almost entirely that. And so that could kind of give you at least an indication of what happens. But when we're talking about these, you know, let's just say it's the top 50% of Chinese urban dwellers. China. So do you know the hukou? I can never say hukou system. It's a household registration. Do you know about that in China?
No, tell us more.
Okay, so the hukou is, I can never say that word. Anyway, it's a little card that sort of fixes you to your home, city, or town, or province, or village. And if you are a rural person, it gives you the right to farm a piece of land. Right, but then again, these pieces of land are going up dramatically in value, and so it is maybe seen as an actual perk these days, whereas in the past it sort of just tied you to the land. If you're in the city, that hukou is what gives you the right to social services, education, healthcare, etc. But I think you probably know that China has had a lot of migration to the cities in recent years. Mm-hmm. And what's been done with that, basically people come to the cities and they don't have these cards. So half of the urban dwellers, maybe, or a little less than half, they don't enjoy the, I want to kind of stress something, incredibly good lifestyle of Chinese urban dwellers. You can live extremely well on not terribly much money, and it's designed that way. This is definitely one of the things that impressed me, was that despite having so many people, even very often the people from the countryside who move to the city, there are ways of getting these cards, for example, buying a house. But even when they don't, often end up doing pretty darn well. And it's because it's a pretty well engineered system. The trouble is at the fringes, of course, because people are people and they want to do their thing. And this is where any system, proscriptive communism, is probably not such a good idea. Communism with top-down control elements and the entire thread of thought in 20th century communism that says that people are better off controlled and that society needs controls in order to function. It seems to have been dead wrong, both on an economic and social level. On an economic level, the centralization results in really producing inferior goods and the reinforcement of monopolies, even if you're in a communist system without money, which is interesting. And on a social level, it just makes people miserable. Now, notice I didn't say I thought communism is really bad. I think that Marx kind of gets a bad rap. He was trying to describe an ideal future. And it's interesting because I think we're going to get to his future one way or another. I don't think we're going to get there by seizing the means of production. Although, well, it's likely that there are going to be different takes on the ownership of the means of production, especially as it gets more and more digitized. This is actually one of the things about MadeSafe that's so cool. It's a platform that everybody shares an ownership stake in. And that's actually, what we're trying to accomplish also with Klouds, is to create a system that can be globally accessed and true two-way participation. My concern with MadeSafe, and I'd love to hear from them about it a little bit, is that it requires client software to install. Or it requires a client to use. You have to install something on your computer. And so we built this thing that's sort of, it's not anywhere near as grand as MadeSafe. MadeSafe is it's a vision for building an information society, frankly. And if it works, everybody's going to be a lot better off for it. What we've built is, or are building, I should say, because we're not done either. It's a distributed hosting system, so that people can host web applications very cheaply. That's our hope. We're looking to, instead of breaking the current system, because it's all right, at least the internet system. I'm not talking the economic or social system, but the internet system, it's all right. We want to make it really cheap to participate in, to put your content out there. Today, it's either expensive or difficult as hell, or both. And that really varies quite a bit depending on how you're trying to use it. And the story is that it's too complicated by a lot. So actually, this grew out of the hardware business we were trying to start. We were trying to ship all sorts of little knickknacks and doodads. This one, it could be a router, it could be a computer, it could be a number of things. It's you plug another board into it. But anyway, we tried to set up a store to sell those knickknacks and doodads and what have yous. And we wanted a blog and a forum and a wiki. And everybody wants these things. I've found it to be really quite universal. Well, in terms of people trying to set up web presences, right? For even small businesses, it gets very, very complicated very quickly. We've used Docker to package applications. Docker is, I'm not sure if the audience generally very technical or not very technical?
You just say what you have to say, my friend. Don't think
All right. Well, Docker is a system for running Linux computers inside of a Linux computer, basically.
Yeah.
And it allows you to run a number of servers where in the past you could only run one. So Docker provides a really great efficiency boost, and it also lets the user do things a little bit more easily. We have a menu of Docker apps, and now what we'd like to be giving people, I wonder if this will work. 1 second, all right?
No, don't worry, man.
All right. think it'll work. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta figure out where my screen ends and begins, but okay. So if you can imagine a pool.
Yep.
A circle, we got a circle, okay. So this is the compute pool. Now everything, it's actually rather complicated. Inside of this you have clusters, and in here there is a daemon that basically goes around and ensures that if some guy has rented chicken.com, that's up and functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, it would launch it in another area, and the store I was talking about, the app store or what have you, the menu, basically functions as an inserter.
All right.
So apps get inserted. Now, again, this is not made safe, because made safe re-engineers the web.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not our goal. Instead, our goal is to help smaller businesses get their platform onto the web, because in the past, you needed to be a pretty damn big business to build a web platform of any decent size or scope.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd like to see that change. There are some small businesses that have pulled it off, and it has taken them too much work. It shouldn't need to be so difficult. And there have been some really good advances lately. Docker is certainly one of them, even though that's sort of it's a systems level change, but it's the kind of systems level change that filters down to the end user really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So this compute pool, there. Oh, wait. You see a bunch of them?
Yep.
Yeah. There's sort of 1.0 over there, or 0.1 as it is. That was a prototype cluster. And we're working on putting together the software to link the machines, sort of. I don't know if I can sit down again. To link the machines together. But maybe we should go back to like application. We can get very deep into theory, but application is probably more important. You know, I think that the reason for doing all of this, the reason for putting forth ridiculous amounts of effort, and I'm sure that made safe. Do you know them, the team?
I know David, and I know Nick, and I know some of them. Yeah, I know.
Gotcha. I imagine it's been a ridiculous amount of effort for them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Software work is, God, there's a reason software companies make so much money. Good software is really hard. I don't know if I can even, explain just how difficult it is, especially making systems work. When you're dealing with more than one component, and your application or your whatever you're working on relies on making a number of them work together well, it is extremely hard, and I definitely can understand why they've, and you want to be optimistic too, right? So it's going to be done in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks. And then maybe it takes a little longer than 2 weeks. But, because you can see it generally, but you have to get the code in place to make it function. Anyway, the reason it's worth it is the effect. It's only by building software like this that we can really affect the sort of changes that we want to see in society. If we just sat back and allowed large companies to write all of the software, we'd be living in a very different world today. Open source has been tremendously beneficial to things, building the internet itself. The internet is a collection of open software systems, more or less. To look at cryptocurrency, it's kind of opened up entire new worlds. You can't really say, the possibilities are so large that you can't say exactly what it might do, but it's clear that it has the potential to, could you imagine if we finally graduated to an economy where, gosh, the possibilities are so huge, but a Star Trek-like economy, one that is based around benefiting people. Because today we can't measure human benefit and pay for it. Otherwise, probably, the people writing open source software, they'd be seeing a large benefit these days. Doctors, hard scientists who do the lab research work would be benefiting because their work goes to benefit people. We have a kind of perverse system right now where you can do work that doesn't actually benefit people and profit, and that's pretty messed up. And I don't know how you create that system. I'm not that guy, right? But if you got the right economists together with the right computer scientists, that becomes possible. And that's why we need better global interactive systems.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's far more wide-reaching and paradigm shifting than we can ever imagine, because it's not only the doctors that contribute to this life, my friend. Every human potential on this planet has the potential to be that. It's one of the things I keep saying over and over again to as many people will listen, that you are the brains of the central nervous system, whether you're a doctor or whether you're the guy out in the middle of the field who's just sitting there making rice or whatever. You're contributing because you're on this planet and you're alive. And if we can, this is where I think we are. I think we're in this paradigm metamorphosis stage of us as a species. We're going from the age of information into an age of the creative and the era of the creative. I always look at it though, and this is what stops me. I always try to think. I don't try to go off on utopia fantasies and stuff, because I always bring it back to the point of, like anything else, we're going to always the weakest point, And one of my concerns, and I'm be fascinated to know that you over there in Vietnam, you're talking about your computer pools and you've got the things up there. What's the weakest? What's if I was going to look at it from an outside perspective, what's the one point of weakness in your system? Is it, for instance, do you have is the problem where you are, or generally could the problem be getting into actual access to the internet, because there's not access connection and stuff? Is that a point of weakness, or is a point of weakness the machine? Or again, I always try to look at it and think, yes, we're on a very momentous shift in humanity, but this could all come down because we've overlooked something really simple. So that's why I had to ask people like you, who are stuck not in a first world. You're out there in the middle of the real world. Who I think it's going to be people like people in Vietnam and like in countries like you that are going to change the world because they're going to have the power to unleash themselves. But that could all collapse if there's bad internet connections or these are kind of things. So from your perspective, being there, what do you think are the biggest challenges we've got to look out for and
Governance.
Okay.
Really. So the tech is wonderful, and in general, it works brilliantly, right? And I'm not just talking about my tech, but technology in general, right? But governments have militaries. And if you look at, just for example, what's going on in the Middle East right now, and unfortunately, let's ignore the Middle Easterners and their suffering. And it's horrible. But let's not look at that just a second. China just sent troops to Syria. The United States, Russia, and China are operating military theaters within like what, 100, 200 kilometers of each other? That's distressing. This really harkens back very clearly to the way the First and Second World Wars started. And globally, if I were going to say, what is our weakness? It's governments, because they have militaries and because they don't appropriately hesitate to use them. Because they don't appropriately hesitate to use them, they shouldn't be. I really feel what you're saying about well, I don't want to go off into the utopia, but we're so damn close.
Yes.
And we could kill it in an instant. And at the same time, we could accelerate it in an instant. This is the realization that drove me to start this business. My theory, my operational theory the entire time has been technology is the decider. If people have access to powerful technology and can use it to benefit themselves, notice the way I said that, use it to benefit themselves, chances are the people who are generally really great all over the world are going to win this. And what I mean by win this is we will avoid a third world war. On the other hand, if closed technological paradigms prevail, look, it could get very bad.
I mean, yeah, man. Yeah. You're absolutely.
It takes so little, like, if we were to turn the kinds of development that we've got going on in software and hardware today and put them toward killing, wow. I mean, it's so bleak, it kind of goes beyond my ability to describe the level of bleakness. But I suppose it's responsible to maybe try to. All right, so let me think up a very plausible future war scenario. Okay, drones. So, drones, the little things that usually hold cameras. Well, imagine one of those that was dispersing biological weapons. And know this, the United States, Russia, and China have all been researching race-based, ethnicity-based bioweapons. That'll kill you based on your ethnic background, essentially. That is worse than a waste of money. That's like abuse of money. People who would put money, which is, what's money? Money is, I guess, we've decided that it's a good way of concentrating human effort. And so to choose to put that much human effort toward literally genocide, because that's what you're researching when you research a bioweapon that kills you based on your race, it's sick.
It is.
And people who would consider that they shouldn't be leading us. And actually, I suppose this brings up another just sort of philosophical thought I had. I don't believe in democracy.
No, not
Because
away.
it's too easily subverted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I look at the United States, and in a way, it makes sense because we allow things to occur on a 51-49. You know, 51% thinks one thing, 49% thinks another, and so we go with the 51. How about doing nothing?
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't to say that people should have no role in government, but probably more to say that to the greatest extent possible, we shouldn't have government.
Exactly, man. And I think you're right, man. I think this is, I mean, I'm an artist. I deal with these things. This is why you know, people like me, people who are creative, we delve in the as much as I did the optimistic. I mean, I could go to dark places about control, and I think this is the moment we're at in this moment, this very moment we're having this conversation. Is humanity's on this brink of, like you said, those who want to control whatever it is, whatever political form, if it's a corporation, I don't care who it is, there's a control element. And man, if you're sat in there, this is what I'm saying, you want to go to dark places. If you're looking at the world right now and say you're head of a corporation, a government, or whatever it is, and you're looking at the world right now and you're thinking, wait, I know technology is going to rise. What's the problem? Humanity. How do I wipe humanity off? And that's where all these darkness comes from. That's why they've always done this. Why do you think, like you mentioned World War One? What did it do? What was the end result of World War One? Human beings being wiped off this planet.
That's right.
You know, the riches weren't
nothing else other than suffering. Like, you know, nothing really changed.
Yep, because that's the ultimate. I'm saying the ultimate value on this planet beyond gold, platinum. Power is humans. We're the humans, and if you're looking at the world, this is what I'm saying. This is why I think it's a very dark time where it could go one way or the other. Because if you're in a government now and you're thinking, wait, artificial intelligence, machines, robotics, that's going to take away the need for these what they trained us to be. These farmers, the farmers in their machine that's going to do all the work for them. Once you take all that out and you've got technology doing it, then that's a really dark place because they look at us and go, well, why do we need humans? We only need a few humans, and we can take all over the world, have a few rich people, the elites, and just wipe out. And as you know, I mean, it starts to get really dark then because you think there's biological diseases, there's all sorts of things they can wipe us out with. And I don't know, let's be real about this conversation. They've done this before. I mean, you've heard about Tuskegee, they've heard about, you know, how they've tried to wipe out. Man, that's what I'm saying. These people. We're going to go one way or the other as a species. We're either going to go into a dark paradigm, or we're going to come out of like this moment, and we're going to transform into a butterfly as a human species, and we're going to become something that we can't. And as much as the caterpillar can't comprehend the butterfly, that's how we are as of right now. Some of us can see the butterfly effect, and some of us are looking and go, but that's where I think, sorry, man, I'm going on too much.
No. That's exactly, and to a T. Okay, we are at the dividing line. We are at that point. Look, I'm going to be happy with myself if I know that I did everything I could to push it toward the good. Okay, because that's all I'm trying to do right now. And everything else, I just sort of dropped it. Okay. I am just trying to push the human species toward a positive outcome with whatever I've got. You know, it's not much. I'm certainly no Elon Musk, but I'll try to be, because, you know, if I didn't, that would be a failure. Especially once you recognize the potential of the times. The potential is not just food, clothes, and shelter for everybody, food, clothes, shelter for everybody, education for everybody, and journeys to space, learning about, you know, like how we came to be. And personally, my father's a librarian. I was always taught to value knowledge, and yeah, the knowledge is worth it. There is, incredible value in seeking new knowledge. And either we go that way, where we give one another our knowledge freely and build upon that as a species with our new technological tools, or, it gets really dark. If you look into the control of technology, if only a few people control this technology, well, those people would have outsized power, and we both know the people who seek outsized power generally not the ones that, species-wise we want having it.
Exactly, and that's what I'm thinking. But I think where we are at this moment, we've got a whole paradigm and a whole system that's been set up against nature, and we're basically going to go with nature. And that's what I'm saying. We're going to transform as a species, and I think it's going to. That's what I'm saying. That's why I can look at it in both ways, and I think, wow, the future could be immense. Because if you release the potential in human beings, man, it's. I mean, it's one of the things that this is a perfect example. How many free energy forms are there that we're not told about, but would just an instant transform us all. Now that information is out there, so it's not only, like you said, it's not. I mean, you made a very pertinent point. It's not only about going out and always innovating and finding new knowledge. A lot of it is sharing the knowledge that's been found, and this is one of the things. We live in an age, and it's maybe taken us till this moment and we're not even doing it, but only now to start to look into what Tesla was doing 700 years ago. And now but the point is that information, it works. So if we can just get to the point of distributing that information, then we can that's how these people have got control. The reason they do all they do on this planet is they're fighting. They're if you look in space, you look down, they're like a virus on the planet, and they just go around sucking the resources from everywhere.
And somehow they got people to believe in it.
Exactly.
There's not enough. But when you look at it, you take any amount of time and look at, the Earth's resources in terms of energy or minerals or truly almost anything, there's more than enough to go around. Particularly with the advances in efficiency that we can make. And that's why I don't say artificial intelligence or machine learning, this is not bad, not at all. It can be good or bad, and it is extremely powerful.
Well, that's why I use this to linger on that point. That's why I think the perfect analogy is the caterpillar. I mean, at the moment, the caterpillar, before it dies, before it goes into the pupa stage, it'll sit and it'll eat and eat and eat, and it'll consume and consume and consume, and then it just sits there, goes into its pupa state, and it comes out a butterfly. And that's where we are. We're looking at us, and we're like this caterpillar. We're just eating everything around us. We're consuming all our resources, but that's part of nature. We're going to stop that and then transform into a butterfly, or we're just going to keep eating and eating and eating until all the resources are gone. And that's, like you said, that's where we are right now. Do we transform into a butterfly, or do we just become a big fat caterpillar that just eats everything?
And I think it is going to become more uncomfortable. What I mean by that is, as you know, the pace of change is accelerating. And these accelerations are themselves spawning other accelerations. Like, just for example, you have like biotech and information tech, right? So if biotech's here, well, guess what? Infotech is applied to biotech, and all of a sudden, biotech is going twice as fast, or 3 times as fast, or what have you. And this is happening in every field, because information technology, in the end, it's applicable to everything. And I think that the next few years are going to be pretty uncomfortable. What do I mean by uncomfortable? Okay, first of all, you have the employment shift. Like, for my generation, this is not really a thing. We've never had a stable employment environment. For my parents' generation, it could be quite a shock. And those in the middle, you know, it's varying degrees of intensity. But the thing is that the jobs aren't going to come back. And I can say that with certainty, whether or not we reach a positive future, because it could be quite positive for these jobs to go away. But systems have to be put in place. Basic income is one of them, to ensure that people can provide for themselves. Now wait, basic income, that's the government giving you money. How is that people providing for themselves? Well, it's not at that stage. But without that, the evidence is pretty clear. If you just cut people off, well, their future suffers, and they can't reskill. They can't, you know, do the things that truly do benefit society a very great deal, that they would do if they had some meager resources. And ensuring that gets distributed is extremely important. Now, you've mentioned with MaidSafe, sort of looking at the earnings potential of that for people. And see, I hadn't really thought of it much on an individual level. And that's interesting because, I mean, obviously they're aware, right, that they could build something so incredible that it could replace government. It could, you know, it's possible that it does become the next economic engine. I don't rule that out for a second. And, you know, I know that the folks writing the code, they're aware of this, and I wonder when it's going to work, not really if. And it might not be this project, it might be some later one, and it might be, trouble is, it might be really nasty. It doesn't have to be a network created by a bunch of free thinkers and people who want to preserve human knowledge and share it. It could be a transnational, you know, really nasty type of corporation. Because one of the things that networks like MaidSafe and Klouds, one of the problems they hit really fast, we don't fit any established business model. We incorporate extremely poorly as like a US S Corp or a US C Corp. It doesn't really work for us. It doesn't work for us because that's not the organizational model that these networks follow. You know, Bitcoin could be seen as sort of an enormous global corporation with more participants, direct participants, than any other. And some of the more interesting projects I've seen in the whole blockchain sphere deal in corporate governance, actually. Trying to allow these communities to make decisions collectively and effectively without the 5149 thing. I mean, it's so clear to me anyway that for the United States at least, that is the problem. We have this bias toward action when inaction is really what's needed.
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing that fascinated me, and it's been a kind of a point about what we've been discussing in this conversation, and it's it's only kind of really dawned to me from a non-coding point of view and a non-technical point of view that basically the future is more in software than it is in hardware. And that's something particularly that's personal to you because you shift from being hardware to software. And it was something we've been mentioning the other night when we've been talking pre-podcast. And I think it's a fascinating an area that you're going to. So kind of, again, why did you make the jump from hardware to software, and why to people maybe who don't have got any idea about that whole concept, why would you say that the future is more software and less hardware?
All right. So see this? It is a thing, and it has fixed function. You insert a processor here, and then the processor is connected to these ports. It's a pretty simple device. This just connects a board to some ports. It's kind of like a motherboard for a computer, but it's for a small ARM computer. It's static though, whereas software is dynamic. And there are a lot of attempts to make hardware like software, and they're actually successful. What I mean by that is that you make this into something that can be compiled the same way we compile code today. But what drove our shift from hardware to software was that while we had the hardware we wanted, the transformative effect for society, it comes from software. And it comes from, frankly, the most difficult class of software. And so moving from hardware to software, for me personally, it was a frank assessment of the situation. I decided to get into this not really for personal benefit. I'd love to get rich off of it, mind you. If I get rich off of this, it means that things are going well because our product is getting out there and the concepts are spreading, and it'll be wonderful. But that's not why I started it. I got into it because I was teaching history, as you know, outside of Shanghai in China. And I came across this document, Global Megatrends 2035. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's called Diverging Worlds. And what it discusses is exactly as we were talking about, that basically that we're going to have a good future or a bad future, and there isn't a middle ground future. And this was the United States government who wrote this, and they said a lot of really non-characteristic things in there. I found it very interesting because it was so frank. One of the things it said, the United States needs to ensure that it is able to lose its military prominence without conflict. And that's pretty striking, right? It was the National Intelligence Service that wrote it, which is not the NSA, not the CIA. The NIS is some other type of spook. But they were very, very frank about changes that were going to happen due to the demographic shift. And indeed, this stuff is gonna occur. And one of the things that they harped on, I found this one extremely interesting. The relationship between the United States and China, if it goes to hell, they consider this to be one of the key pivot points. That if that relationship is sour, that there's a far larger chance negative future. And if that relationship continues on well, there's a far higher chance of a positive future. They even got into economic numbers on that, like what that should and could look like. I'm not much of a fan of my own government. I'm from the States originally. But that document and the very cold, frank assessment that it laid out of different pivot points that could shape the future, that's what drove me to get into this, and I couldn't do it with hardware. Why? Because you build networks with software. You build communities with software. And hardware is the vessel. We still have the contacts to produce hardware. But when we sell it, we want to sell it with a complete software platform so that it's finished. I'm a big enthusiast of various. In fact, hell, 1 second. So I know the guy is making all these things, and I'll give him the 10-second plug. This is a geek box. It's made by my friend Gawa, and let's see, what does it do? It is a very powerful 8-core computer on a single board. This is a banana pie made by Sanofi IP, and it's almost exactly like a Raspberry Pi. It's a lot faster than the Raspberry Pi 1, a little slower than the Raspberry Pi 2. And it's really cool, $35. But this is where it gets interesting and potentially world-changing. All right, the Geek Box thing, this is $99. All right, so that's $100 micro PC, $35. But really, really interesting, this is a $15 computer.
Wow.
With a gigabyte of memory, with a gigabit Ethernet card, with a quad-core CPU. Now, you asked why I'm getting into software. Well, look, hardware is pretty much done. And actually, I gotta say that this is a purely Chinese thing, okay? Even, as I said, I have some positive thoughts on the Chinese government too. Their design made this possible, okay? What they did, they designed a province for building electronics, Guangdong province. And basically, from 79 onward, when Deng went down to Shenzhen and said, we're gonna open Guangdong to the world. Well, they did. Not only did they do that, as they did that, they laid out a scaffold for how to develop the area. And they clustered compatible businesses together. Because again, China's not entirely free market, and it's not entirely communist. It's a blended system that frankly, again, when they're not busy controlling everybody, is highly, highly effective. So they put together in one place the infrastructure necessary to end-to-end produce this thing. Electronics manufacturing is very complicated in terms of, if you were to compare it to, say, making shoes or making toys, right? This is orders of magnitude more difficult. But they built the infrastructure for making it cheap. Cheap enough where, Guangdong province can now supply electronics to literally the entire world. Cheap enough to almost where it's a problem. What I mean by that is that here in Vietnam, it's very difficult to make electronics, even though this is depending on which statistic you read, number 2 or 3 place to do so in the world. It's difficult to do that because, all right, this little thing on the board needs to get made somewhere, as does this little thing on the board, and this one, and this one. And only in China have they made I heard a statistic once, $70 trillion investment in infrastructure in Guangdong province alone to concentrate the facilities in one place and produce this cheaply and effectively. Now, It doesn't do much without software, though. It's just a board until you put the software on it. Once you put the software on it, this little board can do, this is faster than the $1,200 computer I built when I was 12. A lot faster. And it costs $15. The work is better than average, but not great. Like I look at these and I can kind of see the quality level of the board, right? And definitely the $100 board here, yes, it's better, for sure. Absolutely, no doubt. In fact, Gawa is a little bit of an artist on his boards, and that's just sort of funny. He likes to make patterns with the little lines. But either that or the engineer does. The EE on his team is a very quiet guy. These are fixed. It's sort of like, I think of it like a foundation. You need hardware, and hardware is very important. And in fact, I do plan to return to open hardware products, particularly when a certain project called Low Risk finishes up. Low Risk is let's see, it's an open source CPU core, which doesn't exist today. We need that very much because there is the possibility that governments try to lock people out of technology. I believe we've seen some of that already with copyright laws and things like that. That there are real attempts to stop people from using their technology effectively. And if that were to become fully successful, we could maybe buy this, try to put made safe on it, find that its binary doesn't pass the certification test and it doesn't run. We could be locked out of using this software. So I want to return to the bottom of the stack at some point, because I'd like to see a completely open build chain for society. In fact, I think it's dramatically important that every step be covered in open technologies. I'm not really against closed tech, although I deeply, I resonate with what Stallman says. You got the beard and that guy. He's one of the early thinkers behind free software, and his whole thought is, if you can't use the source code, the software can pull a nasty inversion on its user, where instead of the user using the software uses you. This is also what he says about Facebook, about Google, because what they're doing, and this is true, although I don't want to demonize either Facebook or Google. I think they're generally forces for good in the world. But they are harvesting and monetizing a great deal of data without anybody's knowledge or consent. Well, you give your consent, but nobody really reads those.
No, my friend, that's the whole thing about the while we're on the Facebook, things like Facebook, and like you said, nobody's forced anybody to give that information away, but people have willingly done it. People have willingly put their lives up, and Facebook. I mean, I'm not going to go any deeper down that rabbit hole, but it's like our generation's version of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was put out in the world not to sell a soda drink, but it was a CIA operation to make sure that they knew what was going on. Same with Facebook. They've got all our information, and people have willingly giving it away, man. And that's the paradigm shift people need to get to, is they don't realize that everything they're doing is stored. I don't think most people won't understand that. They just think it's just a social network.
Right.
But that stuff's out there forever and ever and ever. You know, they own you.
URL you visited, and I mean, heck, let's maybe pull back from the companies, because I never really can tell if they're coerced or in cahoots, right?
Exactly.
So I won't bother addressing the corporations. I'll assume that since they've both done a lot of good things, that they're coerced into sharing their data. No. However, when you look at what the NSA does, you know what PRISM actually refers to? Like why that program is named PRISM?
No.
Right. In fiber optic cables, right, data moves through light. And you can split a fiber optic cable with a prism. And that's exactly what they do in hundreds of places all around the world. They split the fiber optic cable, and they take it and they grab all the data traveling through one of these major backbone cables and suck it into their system. So to a certain level, it doesn't matter what the companies do, because they'll get it anyway. And you know, it's been shown that the most widely used encryption protocols on the internet, they're useless, utterly useless. And that, you know, like for example, HTTPS, no, the government's, that's dead. RSA encryption for email and like, dead. Like, and you know, this has been shown, and yet nobody takes action over it. I know that part of that is, you know, if you look when the technology industry does try to do something, the governments actually fight it these days. And this encryption debate, what the hell? There is no fucking debate. There's no fucking debate at all there. It's just, look, it's math, you know? It works one way or it doesn't work. And that's, I know that the politicians must get this. I don't know how they think this can possibly benefit them, though, because it benefits nobody to eliminate all privacy globally. That's really what they're asking for. And, you know, it might help, you know, if you're talking to somebody about this, to let them in on what, you know, one of the big venture capitalists in Silicon Valley says about this transformation, right? He says software is eating the world. Now, one way to look at that is very negative, and another way to look at that is just that our life is becoming software mediated. And I do believe that, you know, more and more of our experiences, more and more of cultural production, literature, film, the arts, computer games, you know, like these are all moving to become software mediated experiences. Hell, this conversation we're having right now is, let's see, you know, we both got webcams that feed into our computers. The video image is compressed in our computer. It's combined on a Google server. Google streams the image, the video out to the audience, and then you have this chat. There are multiple encryption protocols. There's multiple, you've got a codec for the audio and a codec for the video. You've got various protocols for ensuring that the stream stays through. You've got, on my side, the VPN. So it's tugging away over there, you know, ensuring that we can actually make the connection, because unfortunately, Vietnam chooses to block Google Hangouts on air. It's very strange. But they don't block anything else. Just this. I really don't get it. But, you know. I hope they don't go and block more. That would be bad.
What on the pieces of software, and I'm sorry, my whole mind has been a bit kind of blown by that. You know, the cheapness of that hardboard you showed me, man. You know what I mean? I'm just thinking on that. This goes back to maybe what I was trying to say earlier on. That doesn't that the potential for a really simple, like I say, cheap, easy hardboard. That's, you know what I mean, hardware. I mean, this is the question I'm going to ask. Would you be able to, like, again, from my understanding, you should be able to farm from that piece of hardware, from that hardboard you got. So that basically gives the opportunity for, man, well, at that price, it opens up the ability for a lot of people to do some farming for SafeCoin, which then is what I was trying to say earlier on. It means everybody can be rewarded from this, not just the person that's got, as you know, I mean, the thing that's always held a lot of people back from technology has been the price. I mean, what was the price of a colored TV 15 years ago? You know, that's why only middle class families could afford it. Now it's you know, and it's the same with hardware. That's what I'm saying. If you could, exactly. So if you've got a cheap hardware, like you say, that you're only paying under $20, under $15 for, that gives you the ability to farm, man, that's a game changer of world proportions, man.
Oh yeah. So let's see. There's also there. Look, this isn't even the best of it in my mind. There's a $15 tablet computer, and it's halfway decent. It's not great, but you know you don't get great technology for $15, but you can get good, and that's pretty damn incredible. In fact, getting good for $15, that makes it great. You know, that makes it just as high of an accomplishment as a very, very advanced tablet computer, because you just made it accessible to how many more people?
Damn right.
You know, if you ever get the chance, anyone you know ever gets the chance, Huacheng Bay Market in Shenzhen, China. Just go. It's incredible. You can fly out to Hong Kong and cross the border into Shenzhen. And Huacheng Bay is this maybe 3-4 blocks of Shenzhen, about 10 stories tall, each of these buildings. So we're talking about like maybe 3 square kilometers, 10 stories tall of computer market. And it is just, there's no place on earth like it. Actually, there are a couple places on earth like it, and guess what? They're all in Guangdong province. And like, you can't discount what they're doing there because it's very conscious. Okay, both the government and the companies building these things, they're very consciously developing a more affordable future for everybody. And for that, they deserve a lot of credit. I don't often think they get it, that credit, that is. And there is growing recognition that, you know, China is not just the place where you build hardware, but it's the place where you go to do the design process and everything else. But, you know, I really do think that they kind of get the short end of the stick in terms of credit there, because they didn't just overtake the production side of things. They created new methods of doing the production that allow it to be much more affordable, and the scale is incredible. You know, I suppose their domestic population in China, that helps because they've got so many people, and so there's a large market for any product they might build. But yeah, like it's moving fast. By the time, well, even today, this is more and more the case. But like, I don't know if you've seen the new hardware brands coming out of China. The fact is, they're better and they're cheaper at the same time. You know, it used to be that buying Chinese product was some sort of compromise. That's no longer the case.
So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe like you've got that little piece of hardware there. You load that up with clouds, with Dawn, maybe ability to go out to safe, to log into safe network, and then, man, you distribute that out to people in Vietnam and Africa, man. It's like seeding the world, and it's like distributing a
Well,
new.
that's actually the plan, sir. That is actually the plan, sir. That is entirely the plan.
Okay, cool. That's perfect, man. I mean, and then so when you do that, well, I mean. So okay. So let's take this into a few months, a year, 2 years down the line, or whatever. So I will go to you. I go to you. I order off you. I buy this piece of hardware. What am I going to receive? What am I going to receive from my letterbox?
All right. Well, what you get is actually, all right. Now, it depends. If you bought the cheapest version, you get one of these with software, right? Mm-hmm. But we've got another one that comes in a wood case that sort of holds it in like this, looks real nice, and that's what you get in your letterbox if you bought that one. The only difference in that case is the case, but we figure that there are a lot of people who wouldn't want this just sitting there, and we also figure that there are a lot of people who wouldn't really be able to afford anything other than just the bare board. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to sell both.
And that would be preloaded what with clouds? What would I?
Okay, so there we go. All right. I want to have it preloaded with whatever the user you choose. And we can do that because we have the connections to the factories in Guangdong. So you would choose I've been calling it the software experience for the device. And at the factory, it's loaded on, done. And it's a little bit of a fixed purpose thing, but it's also about user convenience because installing software can be a real pain. So we make sure that the software is upgradable, that the board actually updates the software on its own without the user needing to worry about the updates, just does it. And it's done. If you wanted to put new software on it.
Perfect.
Yep. Because, I mean, if you didn't allow people to do that, it's practically an environmental crime. In fact, that's another thing that was kind of driving us to get into all this is that, all right, this is an early prototype of modular computing, right? And, this lays into here, right? So it's got a slot. And bam, you've got your computer in the board. Mm-hmm. This, in the design I had made for it, about that big, much smaller. And, I don't know, felt the need to throw a lot of extraneous ports on there. But that's all right. If it were made smaller, well, I gotta share something with you. The foundational compute unit of a mobile phone, a desktop PC, a router, a television, a car, they're all the same, exactly the same. You have a processor and RAM, and you can make it quite small. We'd like to do that because then you could take the compute module from your phone, put it in your TV. Your compute module could recognize, oh, I'm in a TV now, and you could use the applications from your phone on your TV or vice versa, or exchanging between them. Also, the fact of the matter is, we know that the compute unit is going to become obsolete, but displays don't go obsolete as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see a lot of this with mobile phones. Like, this thing is really old as hell. And, you know, I'm going to buy a new phone because it's really, really slow. But the display is fine, even though this is, Paul is like 5 years old. Nah, he can't hear me. But, you know, then the computer could be changed without throwing away the body of the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Save a lot of money, and save a lot of resources. And as to your question about the software bundle, MadeSafe is indefinite, Freenet is another, the Klouds network is another. For Klouds, we're going to sell them in clusters, so that like the user would buy 4 boards at once, and they combined form a compute cluster. The reason compute clusters are so nice in this application is that there's failover between the nodes. Now, MadeSafe shouldn't require something like that, although if it does, I'll build it. I'm very curious to see, we're all curious. I'm just going to let them do their work. I want to post 1,000 questions. So what's it going to be like? What's it, you know, because, well, we'd all like to know. But I know that they don't know yet exactly what it's going to be like. I'm sure they've tested it quite a bit, but you can't really know until you scale the network. That's actually, that's what I was posting about with Klouds on the Safe forum. And I have not yet put up the beta test image, but that's going to be really interesting because we want to try to get, you know, maybe 1,000 people in a beta and see how the nodes interact. We can't really simulate that here. You know, we've got a 10 node cluster, and that was hard enough to get the resources together to make. But with 1,000 nodes, we can kind of get a sense of how the systems work together. And so now that might be about all I got for today. But you know, if you've got any more questions or anything, you know, I'm not out of time or anything, but maybe out of speaking juice.
No, man. I mean, it's been the one. I think we've kind of really for this conversation, man. We've really kind of like scraped upon a few kind of areas. We haven't really sort of delved into it, but the one I really wanted to really focus on was because I think it's one of the factors that's really essential right now is ability to get people to get out there and farming. If the safe network is to really progress and become strong, we need people not only just becoming, you know, users of it, but farming. And when I'm honestly in the space of this conversation, seeing that board there in front of me, thinking, wow, that has the potential to we could, is a perfect farming tool. So my friend, I mean, we haven't really sort of delved upon into Dawns. I mean, maybe before we do sort of wrap this up, you know, give a quick sort of overview of what you plan to do with Dawn and then the whole that kind of what the whole concept of that is.
Sure thing. All right. Dawn, first of all, that's not our primary focus at the moment. Right now we're working on Klouds, but Dawn is going to be an open source hardware company that produces products of Apple-like quality at mass prices. What I mean by mass prices is that we're going to aim for the highest possible quality. We're not optimizing for profit. We're optimizing for wide distribution. You know, companies have to make profit. We want Dawn to make some profit, but the pricing is not going to be exclusive the way Apple's pricing is. And again, like I mention Apple because I really do look up to what they do, okay? Apple designs very friendly technology products, and they've made tech accessible and usable to so many more people than, if they didn't exist. The experience is quite polished, but they have this elitist thing going on. And that's certainly not something that we want to replicate. Instead, we want to ensure that top quality products get to people. So the original plan for Dawn was the modular compute system I described to you. And I do want to say, if anybody's watching this and they think, oh shit, I want to make a modular compute system, but I don't want to take my idea and just go make it, okay? And we'll work together and it'll be fine, right? Take the branding, take the whole thing and just go do it, because this is not about my having done it. It's about it getting done. A higher quality at much lower cost is very, very possible. It's so within reach. If you look at some of the stuff coming out of China, it's utterly incredible, but it's generally lacking in the software department. And it's part of why we're doing software now. Software is diverging in China because of the Great Firewall, and it's taking another path. It's not a bad path either, but if you saw it, Chinese mobile software, for example, you would not know how to use it, not just because it's in Chinese, but because the interface is laid out for a different way of thinking about the purpose of device in society. And well, the ripple effects from that, they're everywhere, but they're hard to identify unless you've really been in both climates, shall we say. And they're likely to get bigger before they get smaller. I imagine that they will eventually get smaller. There are a few scenarios. Just for example, the Chinese Communist Party could transform the whole world in very positive ways if they just stopped controlling everybody. And some other, it's not an evil organization, not at all. But they've done evil things. I don't know what to say about that exactly. And that's certainly the scenario they want. Another scenario for the world, we could see, basically technology overcome governments. That's the one I'm personally behind. I'd like to see our technology replace the government, make it unnecessary. Because today in most places, I don't see the government doing much for people. No. Maybe there was a time when it did. I don't know. And I wasn't alive then. But since I've been alive anyway, the government has mostly been about restrictions. And we don't need to be restricted. Period.
Yep. No, as I say, I think that's a very almost zen way to round this conversation up, my friend. I think you put it in a very distinct kind of.
You're right. It's an excellent closing point. We don't need to be restricted.
But man, before there's a couple of things before I think it's essential. So people out there, where can they reach out? Where can they find more about Klouds? Where can they find more to support you? If they wanted to listen to this and they wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you? Where can they get involved? Because, and what do you want from people? And you know what I mean? If someone's listening to this, I mean, what do you want from people and where can they reach out and how can they help you?
Well, so right now, they can find our things on GitHub, github.com/superordinate. And we'll have a website at klouds.org in the next couple of days. But we had taken that down as we sort of refocused on our dev process. They can also reach me personally. My email is jake@klouds.org. And I answer any email I get. And I'm very happy to talk with anyone. In fact, developing this, doing all of this has definitely involved a I'll talk with whomever, and slowly we sort of built up a network. What are we looking for? What would be helpful? Look, if you in the audience, you sir, you ma'am, who I cannot see, are a systems programmer and you fancy getting to see the world some, we can't offer you terribly much financially, but we can tell you that we live quite fine and without difficulty. What we can offer you is the opportunity to build products that could change the world and a fairly good network to develop that within. What I mean by that is we have built quite a good network in the Chinese hardware community and in the Vietnamese software community. There are a lot of excellent developers here in Vietnam. And for hardware, you can't beat Shenzhen. That's that. I tried. You can't. So, if you're working, if you have interest in distributed systems projects, if you find made safe interesting, well, one thing's for sure, we're certainly going to be releasing hardware for it. So if you're somebody who's sort of looking for work with a greater purpose, we probably got that for you. And let's see. If there's anybody who is, we are looking to produce one of those, like an explainer video, and we have not been able to do that yet because not much for the video editor. Paul's been working on that, on video editing. So I suppose that's a little bit, but basically, financially we're all right. Although as we go on later, we're going to have some financial needs too as we try to grow the operation. What I'm trying to say is, if you're a technical person and you want to work on something that the goal, the only goal, is to push positive social change, come on down, really, get a hold of me. We'll figure out how to get you here. We've done it before, we'll gladly do it again. We are trying to build a community here of people who do technology with purpose. And love to have you join.
Perfect. Well, man, it's been, how can I say this? It's been an enlightening and an insightful conversation, man. I kind of feel my head's been blown. Every time I speak to you, my friend, I go away with my head being blown that little bit more, and I'm like, wow. So you've been it's been very inspirational talking to you, man. And obviously, I mean, I personally will keep an absolute keen eye on what's going on with your projects, and I'll do everything I can to sort of fly the flag and do that. And again, I mean, this always, anytime you want to come back here, and we can because I say we kind of scratched upon a few things tonight, and there's so many subjects and rabbit holes we could really go down upon. So I look forward.
It was really good. I had a great time talking to you as well. So
I look forward to it. I look forward to having you back on, my friend. And then, well, from me over here in Scotland and over in Vietnam, man, I want to say life is people.
Life is people.
Perfect.